Halo Infinite's Big Team Battle flight ended a few days ago, and despite us only being able to play on one map, it was enough of a glimpse into what Big Team Battle is for Halo Infinite. Seeing as the purpose of these flights is for feedback, I wanted to give my opinion on what we played, both the positives and the things that I think have room for improvement. If you find yourself enjoying the video, a like and a subscribe would be appreciated, and consider joining the channel and becoming an official member. Halo Infinite marks the first time Big Team Battle has been a back-of-the-box mode in almost 9 years. In general, Big Team Battle is an important part of the Halo experience. Large maps with larger player counts and the seamless transition between vehicle and on-foot gameplay that the series does so well. Seeing as Halo Infinite is a soft reboot for the series, a fresh start for not just the story but the mechanics, art style, and multiplayer, having Big Team Battle be front and center was an incredibly safe and smart bet. The first positive I need to mention is the foundation. Halo is at its best when the game is driven by the maps and their sandbox rather than a loadout and player-driven system. It forces the player to think beyond themselves and engage with the maps in more meaningful ways, and it allows for the developers more freedom to balance and curate the experience via what they do or don't place on the map. For all the pros and cons I may have about Big Team Battle and Halo Infinite right now, most of my cons can be rectified by the developers simply opening the Forge tool and making adjustments to what is or isn't on the map. The foundation of Big Team Battle and Halo Infinite is developer-focused, and that's a good thing for long-term balancing. The next positive I need to mention is that with the shift away from Halo 5's loadout-driven Warzone experience and onto the sandbox-driven experience that Halo is known for, comes a lot of interactivity for the player. Whether it's the placement of machine gun turrets at each base, the fusion coils, and the amount of environmental and interactive shenanigans, there's this ever-present desire to explore the environment and make creative use of the map. There's a skill and a craft that comes from utilizing elements and gadgets found on the map that helps make the original Halo trilogy, and now Halo Infinite, so shareable. It's no secret why you're seeing so many impressively memeable clips from the game on social media, such as using a brute skewer on a man cannon and landing a hit on a vehicle from across the map, or grabbing a fusion coil out of the air with that final grappling hook charge you were saving, and flinging it back at the enemy. The next positive we need to mention is the presentation. The team mentioned a week or two ago that they wanted to take a bit of that Halo magic that the single-player team were trying to recapture and spread it to the multiplayer experience. You probably noticed that at the start of each arena match, the camera will fly into the helmet of your multiplayer Spartan, and a developer on Twitter actually confirmed that it was inspired by that moment in the first Halo campaign when the camera flies into Chief's helmet after receiving Cortana. Little Halo-y flares like this are littered throughout the Big Team Battle experience. Weapon pods from Halo 2 and 3 will fall from the sky containing power weapons. Pelicans will drop off warthogs and scorpions in ways not too dissimilar from iconic campaign moments. There's this ever-present Halo campaign atmosphere that permeates the Big Team Battle experience. All of this is then complemented by the Reactive music system. So my next positive goes to the Reactive music system that sort of ebbs and flows during the course of a match. What's really tough about designing music for a multiplayer game is that if you give your music too much rhythmic pattern, let it be a song, then that song risks becoming repetitive if the player is on their 1,200th match and the same song that they've been listening to over and over is driving them crazy. It's obvious that a lot of careful thought and consideration went into making sure that the stingers, the atmosphere establishing pieces, and musical moments don't overstay their welcome and imply Halo music, rather than literally play Halo music note for note, drumbeat by drumbeat. There was this moment in the multiplayer when my team captured Red Team's flag, and this incredibly dreamlike guitar chord played that was then broken through by a Halo choir. The choir had heavy reverb, which made it seem like it was echoing through the canyon walls of the map itself. It was this incredible moment that sent shivers up my spine. Something that I hope happens in the future is 343 releases some of these atmospheric pieces of music they have. Official game soundtracks that are edited for listening to on Spotify are fun and all, but I live for those people who rip atmospheric ambient tracks from the games and upload them to YouTube. These kinds of music that are more atmospheric tools, glue, than they are songs, are the unsung heroes of any game's soundtrack in my opinion. And Halo Infinite's multiplayer has some excellent atmospheric glue tracks that I hope see the light of day. These next few positives are less about the mode Big Team Battle and more about the map that we played on, Fragmentation. Fragmentation's general art and aesthetic is fantastic. What we played here felt authentically outdoors in a way that I don't think the Halo engine has been able to achieve in quite a while. When the first Halo was designed back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the sprawling and mountainous outdoor environments were inspired by Washington State. And this is probably the closest the series has ever been to truly, perfectly capturing that sleepy, overcast, foresty aesthetic. There's a passion and a care that went into getting the dull green/gray look of the grass and trees, the way the clouds overhead actually cast shadows on the play space below that move in real time. And that's a detail that I don't think I've ever seen a first-person shooter consider. And then you've got the various creatures that move about the map and the abandoned camping equipment that all paints this sense that the world has a history that'll exist beyond this little multiplayer match. The Forerunner locations feel like authentic, high-quality recreations of environments veterans of the series have explored in the past, creating a strong sense of lost wonders and outdoor exploration that made the series so iconic back in the early 2000s. Another bit of praise I need to give is the concept of AI interactions with the environment. The loot cave itself is one that I have conflicted opinions about, but the idea it represents is something that I quite like, that big team battle maps have little locations that your AI can interact with, and I hope this is a mechanic that becomes a staple of the mode and not just restricted to all big team battle maps have a loot cave. Interactive map elements is something that the Halo series is no stranger to. Opening and closing doors, piloting massive mobile bases, turning on weird Forerunner structures, etc. That's all exclusive to each map and gives each map something that it can boast as a part of its identity, what makes it special compared to the others. I really do hope it's not just loot caves. I hope that every big team battle map has its own interactive set piece thing that can be triggered by our AIs. With the positives out of the way, I think it's time to talk about some of the areas of the game that I think could use improvement prior to launch. If you're not a fan of talking about negatives, then I'd recommend checking out here, but let's get started. So the first area of improvement I'd like to see is actually how the kinetic weapons are handled. Games like Warzone and Apex Legends have shown us that at a range, there is some value to having a projectile bullet system. It sort of self-balances weapons at a range and ensures that you're not just being melted from all directions by hit-scan weapons that have bullets that travel faster than the speed of light. It takes a bit of skill to hit targets from a range and is part of why weapons like the Skewer are so fun to use. In Halo Infinite, I found that weapons like the Assault Rifle, the Battle Rifle, and the Commando dominated a bit too much at a range, and part of this is because of their extreme ease of use. I honestly think you don't have to do much tweaking to the damage or rate of fire. All you have to do is implement a projectile bullet system. That way, players can't just spam their shots at a range and be guaranteed hits, and they'll have to lead their shots a little bit and actually grow and develop as players. Now, my next area of improvement I'd like to see is that I do wish vehicles and parts of the sandbox were handled a bit less like randomized rewards and more like organic parts of the sandbox. Tools for each team to make advances with. Treating tanks, ghosts, and certain items in the sandbox as rewards or randomized events instead of tactical options for each base makes the matches feel a tad directionless. If the fear is a Halo 5 Warzone type situation where you're just steamrolling each team, I don't think that's an issue at all purely due to the sandbox placement being 100% in the developer's control. If Scorpions at each base prove too problematic for match flow, just replace them with Wraiths or Rocket Hogs. As of right now, Big Team Battle has no push because a lot of the stuff in the sandbox is a reward or a timed event or these randomly spawning things. Think of the Banshee on Sandtrap and how that kind of drives the first minute or so of matches on that map. Think of the Spartan Laser at the center of Valhalla, or how the tanks drive the initial encounters of that map. The production value in Halo Infinite is nice. It's cool seeing Pelicans drop these things off, but the randomness I think dilutes the tactical value of Big Team Battle. It makes the matches feel kind of samey and blend together because there's no real consistency. There's no room to form strategies or anything because you're just reacting to randomized events and things dropping into the map. Next area of improvement, I think, is the weapon racks and the unintentional limitations they put on sandbox placement. In previous Halos, weapons were organically placed around the environment. They could be leaning against a wall, resting on some stairs, on a table next to some frag grenades, or even amongst the debris in a crashed UNSC Pelican. With Halo Infinite's weapon rack system, all weapons, by design mandate, must be attached to a wall. If it's not on a wall, it can't be on the map. This kind of weird, arbitrary restriction also goes for certain kinds of weapons such as grenades, rockets, and snipers, which must be floating on a video game weapon spawner. You can't have grenades neatly placed in a UNSC weapon crate, since that's not a floating video game spawner. The idea of the weapon rack is understandable. 343 wanted a more organic, in-universe way of giving players weapons, but I'll be honest, a weapon leaning against a tree, abandoned, but ready for me to pick up, is a lot more organic than a UNSC weapon rack bolted to a tree or on a rock cliffside. I also noticed that 343 doesn't seem to want to place weapon racks too close to each other, probably since it would look unintentionally goofy to just have the walls covered in these things. This is a new restriction. That means you can't have a few SMGs laying on the floor next to each other, or a couple battle rifles on the same wall at spawn like you could in past Halo games. I do think, for the sake of creativity and variety, exclusively using the weapon racks and pads should at least be reconsidered for Halo Infinite. If the fear is that players will miss weapons in the world, I think that Halo Infinite's art direction is a lot less messy than Halo 5's. It's easier to get a read on any environment you're in, and the fact that all interactable items in a world are covered in this neon HUD goo means that there's very little chance of you missing something. Just for the sake of variety, this weapon rack restriction should at least be reconsidered. My final bit of feedback would be the removal of Jeffitzer from Big Team Battle. In Halo 5's Warzone mode, 343 recorded lines for Jeffitzer to say, "Warzone!" But ultimately they chose not to use him, instead opting for the Spartan commander, Sarah Palmer.
"Garage defended."
I would have greatly preferred hearing Halo's iconic voice of God announcing my sprees and objective captures. In Halo Infinite, 343 have gone a step further and removed Jeffitzer from Big Team Battle, replacing him with a new Spartan commander who, like Sarah Palmer, just isn't a replacement for the voice of God. Something about Big Team Battle felt extremely empty, and it wasn't until I got a double kill and was met with silence when I realized it was because I didn't hear the buttery smooth ASMR of Jeffitzer, the sound that Halo's multiplayer is known for. 343 wants this new Spartan commander to work with the community in a way that Sarah Palmer didn't, but I think 343 is immediately making the exact same mistake they made with Sarah Palmer. Instead of organically introducing this new character to us, they have surgically removed an iconic staple of Halo's audio spectrum and replaced it with somebody who just kinda sounds like a person, not a voice of God.
You're beginning to make this look easy.
Perfect.
So seeing 343 listen to the feedback from Halo 5's Warzone and make the exact same mistake in Infinite, but this time with a fan favorite mode like Big Team Battle, it's a bit of a head scratcher to me, to be honest. I want to hear Halo's iconic voice of God in Big Team Battle again. So in conclusion, I think Halo Infinite's Big Team Battle core is extremely solid. It's designed in a way that can be extremely modular for the developers, with lots of room to add or remove things to improve the flow of matches during the course of the game's life. It's got a strong presentation with excellent production value and a solid Halo atmosphere. Cracks that do exist on the edges of the mode, such as weapon placement, items in the sandbox being treated as rewards rather than organic sandbox tools, and of course Jeffitzer hopefully can be fixed prior to launch, or at least very soon after launch. Overall, my thoughts on Halo Infinite's Big Team Battle is good. What we played though was a single map with a limited sandbox, but first impressions were solid. Now, what I will say is this: I'm going to disconnect myself from my own opinions about the Halo franchise. What gripes and complaints that I do have about the game come from my own perspective as a Halo fan who has about a decade and a half worth of expectations about the game. Sometimes it's a bit refreshing to step outside of my own expectations and check in on the larger gaming scene and see how they're responding to it. It's fun hearing folks who aren't too familiar with Halo, or who did like Halo but kind of got out of it, really enjoying the tech test. Content creators, streamers, and just general gamers who express disappointment in the more Call of Duty-like direction the series went in with Halo 4 and 5 are saying that they found Infinite to recapture a bit of that Halo magic that caused them to lose sleep staying up all night on matchmaking during the days of Halo 2 and 3. My only concern right now for the game is 343's response time to keep players interested. They have a formula here that seems to actually be resonating with people, and while players are hooked on the game, they need to be quick about keeping a pulse on what their community is looking for. New weapons, fast updates, and an attention to bug fixes and polish. Halo Infinite launching without a Forge tool for half a year is going to be a huge blow to the creativity of the community. And it's up to 343 to not drag their feet with new modes, features, and playlists like they did with Halo 5's live service, if you remember. 343 has a game here that seems to be the modern Halo game that the series needs. And if they can keep this momentum up, we might be in the green. How do you feel about Halo Infinite's big team battle, though? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know down below, and if you want to, feel free to join the channel. It's just the price of a coffee every month, and it gives you access to exclusive polls, community updates, and a ton of fun Craig-fueled emotes. I'll leave you guys to it, and I'll see you on the next video.